7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Rise to Liberty. This morning I am joined by Jion, the Zen Master. How are you doing this morning?
I'm very good. Thanks, Jacob, and thanks for having me.
No problem. I guess it's actually evening over in your part of the world, but
Yeah, it's like 5 o'clock around, or 6 o'clock, I think.
it's not too bad. So, one thing that we had been trying to get together and talk about was failure and the fear of failure. This seems to be something that kind of, I would say, it cripples a lot of people. It prevents, I think, a lot of people from being able to really pursue things that make them happy, and really achieve everything that they possibly could achieve if they weren't held back. So do you kind of want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think we should just walk in there. The jumping wouldn't make sense because it's a huge topic. So
Yeah.
yeah, we have plenty of time. So let's just look at it, together.
Yeah, of course.
It's a very
Oh, go ahead.
It's a very interesting topic, I think, to many people nowadays. If I go to social media, we met, I think, on Clubhouse. So there's plenty of rooms about this topic. So the fear of failure, but also the imposter syndrome. Are you familiar with that?
I am. It's actually something that happens quite a bit with people who do anything within the public realm. It's a big conversation amongst podcasters, especially. It's the question is always like, well, who am I to be telling people or talking about these things? Like, why should people listen to me? So it is a big discussion amongst the podcasting community.
Yes, it is a big discussion amongst the creator community, the people who show themselves, but also it is a big discussion among the people who are not showing themselves, and that's why they don't show themselves, because they're afraid. They're afraid to make mistakes, but also afraid with, as you said, who am I to speak? And having no voice, or feeling that they have no voice, or that their voice is not valuable. So yeah, on both sides, yes, it's true. And first of all, before we look at the problem itself, we have to realize that there are two worlds and two different kinds of people, let's say, because you cannot have the same solution for everyone. So I would distinguish it in two parts to make it simple. Of course, it's much more complicated because in the end, everyone is different and the solutions are individual. But to simplify it, let's take two different types. And one type of human is the one who went, and I would say it's the normal, so-called normal type of person who went through the school system, through the Western kind of school system, university or college, as you say in US. So, and kindergarten, and all that system, right? You go through that system, the normal system. I don't talk about Montessori system, like the special kind of schooling right? So if you go through that system, if you look at it, that system is made for the working class. It's made for, it didn't change too much, and it is made for making the children good, abidant workers, and listening to the government, listening to what they're told, and with a very clear structure, moral structure, and what is right, what is wrong, black and white, kind of dual perception. And not too much thinking for themselves, and not too much questioning either. So what does it make to a child? If you look at a child, is there really any child who's stupid? If you look at children, how is it possible that they learn so fast languages and so fast things that if you look at someone, an adult person who had an accident and then has to relearn to walk, it takes years. The child learns so fast and so efficient. I think more efficient in a way than adults do. And so how is it possible that children do that if there are some children who may be dumb? I don't believe that there is any child who is dumb or stupid. I think there is different types of intelligence, and we have to find out what is the type of intelligence of the child. But also there is this general awareness and intelligence which gives the child the power to accomplish, to learn languages, to learn to walk pretty fast and very efficient. So, and then it goes to the parents. The parents usually, well, nowadays, Western type of parenting is helicopter parenting, usually, right? So the parents are in working 8-10 hours a day. Have in America, many have 3 jobs. So you create a child, you have no time for the child. Who is taking care of the child? The grandparents, the kindergarten, some other people. Those people cannot really take time for their child and on an individual level. They work on a mass level. So they have 20 children, so they cannot attend your child individually for too long. So what does it all mean? It means that the child does not develop as it could. It means that the child has all that abilities and all that potential, and it is mostly wasted. So then it goes to the school, to the kindergarten, to the school, and what are they teaching you? They're teaching you what is right, what is wrong. They're teaching you about things that you have to remember. So they feed your mind, but do not teach you how to think. They don't teach you critical thinking. They don't teach you self-awareness. Know yourself, as Platon said, right? They don't teach you to know yourself. They don't teach you to question yourself, to question things, to how to discover things by yourself. All they do is just give you formula. You learn that formula and then you apply that formula, and that's it. So what do you become? You become like a computer who is just programmed to do and to be what other people decided for you, mostly. And so then with time and development, maybe if you're lucky, you may find more things out of yourself, about yourself, than you knew. But if you're not so lucky, you may just go on forever until maybe you realize you don't even know who you are. Maybe you never realize that. That's the midlife crisis, they call it. It's also the puberty. The puberty for a child is often nothing else but the realization for the teenager that he or she or they realize that they are more than the parents told them or their society told them. And so they try to free themselves from all that limitations and boundaries. So the stronger the puberty is, the stronger was probably the type of conditioning that happened to them. So that is, to just generally, not to make it too long, that is the one type. And so for this type, especially, failure is very important. It's the most important thing to do. Why? I guess you have already an idea. You want to comment on that, or as you like? I can go on.
Well, it kind of seems as though going through Western education, it almost seems as though failure, at least now, at one point in time, it was more of you do not succeed unless you fail. And now it seems entirely different. It seems as though that failure could even mean the failure to the system itself, because like you said, they do not teach you to question. They just teach you to remember to be an obedient little worker. And so it seems as though that failure could even be a rebellion of sorts, that to fail means that you are bringing dishonor to not only yourself but to your family and to your place in society. And it kind of just, at least here in the States, that's kind of what it seems like they're pushing for. And so it just to push you further to never question, and to just fall in line.
Yes, exactly. There's many points that you said. We could go on to them. Yes. So, for instance, what you say reminds me also on belonging. So, if you learned all your life, you learned that you are nothing without the group, and you cannot really create anything worth without the others, without belonging to the group. And you don't learn as an individual to truly think and self-reflect, critically self-reflect. Then all you have left is belonging to that group. So in that moment you fail, it means that you're nobody, you're nothing, and you have no belonging. You don't belong to anyone, and that's the most horrible feeling that we can have. And it is not because of failure, it is because we were conditioned to not belong to ourselves, but belong to the nation, or belong to the family, or belong to the company. Like in Japan, you see that a lot. Yeah, and I do not say that this is completely wrong. Actually, in the West, we have a lot of individualism right now, which is not true individualism, because everyone is same in that individualism. It's not. It's more on the outside. On the inside, it's the same. So it's like, okay, I take another glass, or I take another lipstick or something, but yet in the inside, it's the same. Everyone, it's actually worse than ever before. It seems that everyone thinks now the same, more than ever. And if you are outside of the sameness, you will become an outcast much faster than ever before. Also, thanks to the media, of course, thanks to the vastness of media and the power of it. So, yeah, belonging is a very important thing. We need belonging, but at the same time, we need to find who we truly are. We need to find our own belonging within ourselves. And we need to find out who we truly are. And so how can I know who I am if all my life I was conditioned to be someone that I am not, mostly? So how can I find that out? How can I find my potential? How can I find my abilities? Only through mistakes, only through failure. It is by failure that I fail in that system, that I fall out of that conditioning. And for the first time, I see, oh, wow, what is going on? And so in that moment when I fail, I realize the walls, the box in which I am living. And failure gives me the opportunity to actually get out of that box. So what happens then is that the box is so dark and nobody has a flashlight because we don't have guides usually. If you don't have a guide, if you don't have people who could support us outside of that box, which is rare still, then it is very dark, it is very frightening. And so we look for something where we can get back to. Like we look for some group or some extremism or some extreme where we can find that belonging if we cannot find it anymore where we had it before. So it gets more and more extreme then. And that's also what we see, that the more there are so many people now who do not have actually a belonging within themselves, nor within society, because society doesn't give it to them anymore, that people just find themselves in extreme groups. And there is now huge groups with extreme views fighting each other. More and more. We see that everywhere now. Yeah, and it's because society doesn't give us a way to be ourselves without being immediately persecuted if we are different, and because we are not provided with that inner knowledge to know ourselves. So that is the first kind of personality, and we will have to talk about failure on that plane. There is the other plane, the human being who did not went through such a system, maybe because his parents took care of that child and really were there and educated and showed, and also by being the light they want to see in the world. So not just changing the world, by being the light that you want to see. That means that when you want to teach your child something, the most important thing is that you yourself accomplish that what you want to teach. And you yourself can live it to the fullest, and not just talk about it. So this is very important. Not just knowing it, but living it, being it. It's very rare again to see. And so when you have such a child who went through that kind of, or maybe even Montessori school or some special kind of school, and even that kind of type of school doesn't mean anything, because if the teachers are small-minded there, that school will not teach the child anything. So it will be, again, the same kind of system and conditioning, just a bit different, but same conditioning. So the most important is that the parents take time for their children, but especially take time for themselves, for their own development first. Number one is you have to develop yourself. Only then you can really teach something to your child, truly. Because the child especially is very open to what you are actually vibrating, what you're actually living, and not so much what you are saying or showing to them. Even your action is less important than what your vibration actually is. Yeah. If you're speaking all the time, I know so many people work, even giving workshops about love, but their vibration is anger. They're like talking all the time about love, 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 but the vibration is anger, anger, anger. How can you teach about love if you don't actually yet manifest it within yourself? It doesn't make sense. I understand that they are teaching it for themselves. It makes sense too. But then they should be honest about it. So if such a person goes through that system, then and learns to self-reflect. And what is it for a child to learn to self-reflect? Well, just let the child experience itself, be yourself self-reflective. The child will become self-reflective too. If you are, the child will become. You don't need to tell your child, oh, become self-reflective. Doesn't work. So if your child is self-reflective, critically also, starts to ask questions, develops its own mind, you will see that the child actually has tremendous wisdom. the wisdom which is not the wisdom of the child itself, but the wisdom of the universe, the wisdom of life. Every child is born with it. And that's, if you never experienced that as a child, you will always have a very strong fear of failure and a very strong sense of imposter syndrome, because you're not connected to the source. You're not connected to the universe within yourself. I mean, from where are we coming from? From nothing, okay, but nothing is just a word. What is that nothing? Nothing. We know as scientists, if you're scientific, then we know there is not such a thing like nothing. So even the vacuum in space is not nothing. So where is that such thing like nothing? We never actually, in science, we never observed nothing. It's impossible. So I suggest, and that's also what Zen suggests, is there is not such a thing like nothingness. Nothingness is fullness, and fullness is nothingness. It's a paradox. But nothingness without fullness does not exist.
So that's really interesting. One thing I want to bring up, and this kind of ties in with the fear of failure stemming from childhood. Have you ever heard the term or the saying that children should be seen and not heard?
Yeah, it's actually a common way now, becoming more and more common. How to educate children. It's like an education base. It's also used in Montessori. So, for instance, rather than tell them something, show them and let them just experience without words. Is that what you mean?
So, I mean, that's what I would like it to mean. Typically, here in the States, it means something much different. It's not even sure what you would call it, an idiom. I believe that it's a way to stifle children's creativity and uniqueness to where they should already be born behaved little adults is typically how it's used. And you know, they shouldn't be laughing, they shouldn't be playing, experimenting, testing boundaries. It seems as though my generation, I'm at the beginning of millennials, and my generation kind of rebelled against that and went the extreme opposite direction, like you were talking about, you know, the two polar opposite extremes. And it seems as though the children should be seen and not heard was typically from a previous generation. And now children are left without any structure. Although I still do see the children should be seen and not heard amongst the previous generation. And I'm just wondering, could that expectation of children to already be behaved, well-informed little adults, taking away their childhood, basically, could that be one of the causes of this fear of failure?
Well, this is very complex. It's very interesting. In a way, from what I observe, children who are brought up that way, so already being adults and behave, or already know about themselves so much, even define their clear sexuality, their clear gender, even though they're still children. All those things, like, you can say it's the other extreme. There is the extreme of treating your children like little babies, like little dolls. And honestly, I do not like such children. I'm honest about it. When I see a child who is made by their parents a doll, I do not like that child. It's not that I don't like the child. I just don't like that education that their parents gave to the child, that example, that conditioning that they gave to the child. Because the child is both a baby, innocent, but it's the same time full of wisdom and full of everything, for the whole universe. And I asked myself, why do I not like? I talked once with my wife and said, I do not like children, I think. But then I realized it's not children that I do not like, it's just that conditioning. Because I know children I love, immediately there is a connection. And I know now why. I like any children, but I do not like that conditioning that children are given sometimes, and often actually, like that conditioning of, oh, you're my little baby, or like my little Barbie, or my little boy, and they treat them like little dolls and like little dogs, but like little, like you can see they have maybe a lot of suffering, or they do not feel safe in their life, so they create that safe heaven, and the child is for them a kind of part of that safe heaven or haven. And that's not good for the child, obviously. But then again, what is good, what is bad? It's the way they do it, and we have to judge it, but at the same time we don't. So if you judge it only, if you only see the negative of it, you do not see the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that this is the development, this is the evolution of humanity, and it needs time to come to that state. It cannot be forced. So you can point it out, and those who can hear, they will hear it. Those who are not ready to hear it, they won't. So this is the one extreme. The other extreme is the child who is very early on not allowing the child to be a child, and everything that you just said. So being already an adult, knowing oneself. This type of children we see a lot now, especially in social media. Very confident, super confident. Seems like they already achieved everything. Like they can do anything. They know everything. And I think this is a huge, huge problem. And this problem is showing now in our times very much in politics, because as you see now, we are the rhetoric. The political rhetoric was never so openly speaking about nuclear wars, for instance. Never happened before. Now everyone is like, no problem, let's just shoot a nuclear bomb somewhere. No, why not doing that? So it's like people are so overconfident. And I mean, partially maybe it's because of the movies also. It's all about Superman, superheroes. That's just the most favorite movies people, children, but also adults watch. It's all about being super strong, super powerful, without any consequences, without any polarity, without any paradox. And so people really, they live in a bubble and not in reality. And so those actually, I do not see them having so much doubt or feeling the imposter syndrome. I wish they would. I wish, because that's where, because these children, even though they are super confident, they are conditioned. They are the ones who are conditioned to be workers, and they are the ones who are conditioned to be leaders. But it's both a conditioning. One doesn't make the other better necessarily. It's like narcissism. There is the positive and the negative. We talked about it already, I think, last time. The positive is the one who says, oh, I am like God, you love me, I'm your king, basically. You do what I tell you. And then there are the ones who say, well, I just want to follow you and do what you tell me. And if I do that, I want you to love me. It's a negative form of narcissism. You don't love yourself, you want others to love you. And the positive is, well, he loves himself, but not truly. I mean, it's not true self-love. It's just a projection of what he wants to be. But he wants the others to love him and to see how great he is. So it's just the same thing of the same medal, another side of the same medal. Yeah. So I wish that there would be more failure, more doubt happening. Actually, if you look at media nowadays, if you look at school, there is no place for doubt. There is no place, even in science. There is no place anymore for doubt, for questioning. If you question a theory, if you questioned some time ago Big Bang, people would think you're stupid. So questioning historical facts, no way. Questioning even now facts of the now, like facts, so-called facts, like questioning the war in Ukraine right now, what's happening right now in Ukraine. You are immediately an outsider if you just question, because in the time where there is war, you have to pick the side. That's what they say. Then when will it finish? In the time of COVID, if a crisis, you have to pick the side. When will it finish then? So in the time of, there will be always some time where you have to pick a side, until you don't, until you realize I do not have to necessarily pick a side. I have to think for myself and create my own side if necessary. So this is the thing. But then if you do that, you start to become afraid. You start to feel that emptiness of not belonging. And then occurs the question, who am I? That's too frightening. That's too much. The greatest fear of humanity is not pain. It's the fear of emptiness. And so belonging is the fear of emptiness.
Yeah, that's well said. So one thing I kind of want to pivot to is more on the side of the fear. So failure obviously is a big controlling factor in not only our country, our lives, the world, all throughout history. But failure is a good thing, as we've talked about. But the fear is really what holds people back, and I think it's, you know, the unknown is what scares people the most. And it seems as though when we are children, if we're not allowed to test these boundaries, or when we're a little bit older, teenagers going through puberty, if we're not able to test these boundaries, then there is a fear because we do not know where, for one, these boundaries are, and for two, what happens if we go beyond the boundaries.
Yeah. It's good to let children play if you see that they are playing consciously, so with awareness. To take danger, but with a certain danger, of course, not too dangerous, like measured danger, but with consciousness. If you see that your child is doing that, this is a very important point. And if you protect your child constantly from facing a little bit of danger consciously, if you see your child is not conscious, it's just kind of running like a chicken without a head, we say in Zen, then yes, you have to, even the slightest danger can be a problem, can be problematic. But if it's a little, let's say it goes on some balancing on some kind of log in the forest, which is not too high. So, and you see that it really is doing it cautiously, with awareness, carefully, then it's okay. You maybe need to let your child do that. You can be somewhere near to the child, but not disturbing that process, because that process is very crucial, very important. Yeah, and just one thing to failure, if you what I didn't mention yet, if you look at all the inventions, if you look at all the great things that humanity advanced, and great developments, many of them are found in failure. So not in just in focused and logical thought process, but in also, of course, it's included, but in failure. If you look at Zen, most Zen monks do not attain awakening while being in meditation, while being in the Zendo, sitting in meditation. It happens when they have sex. It happens when they go shopping. It happens when they go through a forest. It happens during their sleep. It happens all kind of occasions, but not during meditation. So failure is, there is not such a thing like failure. Failure is a creation of the mind. So we have a goal, we think this is how it should be. And so on behalf of that, then we can say this is failure. But in reality, mostly it's not such a thing like failure. In order to make a failure anyway, you have to compare either yourself to someone else or your situation or action to a situation or action which was previous. So it's always going into the past or to someone else. But if there is no past and no previous, and if there is no someone else, what is there to fail? You just try and error. You do things, you learn from it, you evolve. There's no other way. If you look at genetics, science says that it happened because of failure that we developed. So there's the less failure we do, the less we develop, and the more we actually make true big mistakes. That's definitely the case. If you don't allow failure, to some degree, we start to make huge problems, huge mistakes, and that's what is the paradox, I think.
So actual mistakes, things
Yeah,
that
like
could potentially be irreversible.
Yeah, for instance, if you do not say, "Hey, okay, you know what? It's admit the failure that whatever we do, politically, let's say, we admit the failure, and so we don't have then World War III because we admit that it was a failure to do what we do right now, and we focus on peace. But we cannot do it because we are so proud, and we have to now go through it no matter what. Even if it means total annihilation, doesn't matter, because we have to now follow that path rather than just admit defeat and admit failure. So it's, and also if you don't teach the individual to fail and to embrace failure, then what we see is on the grand scale that there are huge mistakes happening. That's basically the Jungian psychology. It's just based on that concept that there is the collective consciousness. So everything that we do not work on within ourselves is showing itself in the collective consciousness. So all the conflicts, all the problems that we face at this moment, like climate change, like pollution, all of this could be traced back, from my standpoint of view, can be traced back to the collective consciousness and to the individual resistance to face one's own difficulties, challenges, trauma, abuse, conditioning. So failure is very important. We have to allow it. We have to embrace it in both systems. But in that other system, the child who went through that system, there is no failure. It does make something sometimes not the way it should be done, but it's all right. It will not feel judging itself or feel bad about it. It will just try it again until it works, or works maybe differently, or realize that it's not something it needs to do, and then do something else instead. It's not a problem. It's not anymore a big deal.
So one thing that you deal with a lot is trauma, and how tied is the fear of failure to childhood trauma. So the fear of failure as an adult, how closely linked is that? Does it spawn directly, or is it more loosely based?
Yeah, I think it's that's just one of the other aspects. So I was talking now generally about failure and the fear of it, which is in all of us. And then there comes trauma, which tops it. So if trauma, abuse, conditioning, I talked about the conditioning. So there is the abuse and the trauma, or abuse coming from trauma, trauma coming from the abuse. So if that happened to you, if you were traumatized, then what can happen is, depending on what trauma you had, that you will feel triggered by certain things. So in that moment, it's not necessarily that you are afraid of failure. It's more that you are afraid of the of what comes after the trigger is happening. So the pain that is stored in that trauma, the trigger is opening that trauma box. The box is opened, the trauma comes out. We experience a re-traumatization. We experience the trauma as if it happened right now. That's not the fear of failure, though. It's just the fear of trauma. But if the trauma is around, let's say you are in the class and you had to perform some singing in front of the people, and people laughed about you. You did some mistake or something. People laughed about you. Teacher made jokes about you. That's in a kind of an abuse situation, and that creates some trauma. And then again, it's not necessarily you're afraid of the failure. You're afraid of that trauma, of that pain that you experienced in that moment. So it's not so much the fear of failure itself as it is the fear of the pain that you experienced in that trauma. But then it's, of course, it's entangled and it becomes the fear of failure, right? So yeah, it's complex. So that's why I say it's really individual, and solutions are never just one-sided. It's usually a package. Yeah, and one important thing that you said, I didn't went into it yet. So it's fear, right? So that's maybe the most important thing. So how to deal with fear? So now it's like it's like Lego, right? The fear of failing, but actually behind it is just fear, right? So fear, generally, it's fear. How to deal with it? Well, that's a big question. It's a very important question. And again, now we have the other extreme. We are living in a time where we see, at least through social media, but I also, if I go on the street, I see that a lot in the West. Young people who are overly confident. You see that also? Or is it just me?
No, I would say that it's something I definitely see, especially due to social media.
Yeah.
It seems almost like it's a constant one up. Everyone has to one up everyone else, and an overconfidence, a false confidence.
Yeah. So overconfidence is always false confidence, right? Because it's over the top. It's why is it over otherwise? Why do you need overconfidence if you can just be confident, right? So there must be something wrong. It's too much pressure, and too much pressure on the machine is always, at some point the machine will break. So something is off the limit. And so what is from where is overconfidence coming? It's very interesting. Not only we see overconfidence now, at this moment we see something new, which is also a sort of overconfidence, but in a different direction, which is vulnerable narcissism. Vulnerable narcissism is a very interesting disposition in psychology. Many people do not know yet about it, it seems. What is vulnerable narcissism? It's a narcissism which is based on the victimhood. So rather than saying, hey, I'm a victim, and going to a therapist or working with other people on it or trying to find a solution, I go into the world and use my victimhood as an identity and as a way of power against others, of using power against others. So I feel as a victim, but rather than feeling as a victim and healing it, I just use it as a weapon. It's a kind of a weaponized victim. So that's what vulnerable narcissism is. Simple explanation. And so where is it from? Where is it coming from? It's very interesting. It's simple. Now, what you see is many people were abused and conditioned and traumatized. Many people do not know that they were abused or traumatized or conditioned, because that's their identity. Why would you question your identity? If a child were abused, grows up, not necessarily the child will think, oh, I were abused. It's my parents. They loved me. That's the way they loved me. If I have no other example, and if I don't suffer too much from it, and things work out for me in some ways, then I will never find it out. Maybe if something breaks, I get a psychological mental disposition or a mental breakdown, then I go to the doctor, psychologist or something, and then I realize, oh, I were abused or I am traumatized. But other than that, many of us do not know it. Then there is the shadows that we do not know about, like basically the things that we have in our subconsciousness without knowing it. So you can call it whatever happened to us, our traits that we push away, do not want to see it, and project it upon other people, nations. All of that. Now I forgot where we were. Can you remind me?
So the narcissism, the victim mentality.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you. So the victim mentality is nothing but a victim who, rather than healing its own wounds and attending them and finding solutions, just gets empowerment. That means you read all over, become the most powerful person that you can be, live out your potential, don't be a victim, be powerful. So what happens is that all that people who are actually victims, and it's no problem to be a victim, we all wear and have an inner victim archetypically within us, according to Jungian psychology, which we have to look at and attend to. So what happens is that all these people, rather than healing, rather than transforming that energy, that sadness, that anger, and so forth, they become empowered. And so in reality, it is not them empowered. In reality, it is the inner victim or the victim who becomes empowered. So now we have all these powerful people who are actually not powerful at all. It's just that their victim is powerful. So powerful that it overpowers them and others. And so now everyone tries to overpower each other. And that's basically what we see. We see it in the individuals, in groups, and in whole nations and political world leaders. I am a victim, and now I have to demand from you that you have to fight for me and protect me. We have to fight for the whole world, even if it means to destroy this whole world, no matter what. So this victim mentality becomes power, and that's not good, because from that never something good can come forth, because it's not true power. True power comes when we transform our victim, when we look at our pain, when we heal that pain, when we include the victim in ourselves.
I see a lot of that within this new or like neo-Marxism of, this person is the victim and therefore we must transform all of society because of this victim. And
exactly, like the children in Europe, in Germany, all the teenagers and children, they go to the streets and say, the old generation is responsible that we will not have children anymore. You are basically destroying the world. Sure, it's easy to say that the older generation is responsible for your unhappiness or that your future. It's easy to say, and I don't deny that there is some truth in that. But the problem with it is that you do not take your own responsibility. You just give it away to that exact people that you blame. And so it will not change the world that way. The world will not change like that. It will just get worse. And that's exactly what we see. Now, all that people that were in Germany in the Green Party and voting for pacifism and protecting nature, getting out of nuclear energy and so forth. Now they are the greatest warmongers and pro-nuclear energy and doing the opposite of what they wanted to do. And I'm not political. For me, it's just, I look at it from a therapeutical point of view. For me, politics is just another game, so which I wouldn't like to attend. But it's very, I must include everything, because everything is part of our true nature. Even politics is part of it. So I know most spiritual teachers do not include it because they're afraid of it and they do not want to get into trouble. But that's their thing. I'm not mainstream, so I do my thing. I don't care if many people like me or dislike me, so much as I care for authenticity and truth. So that's why I include everything.
Well, I definitely I don't enjoy the fact that politics is so prevalent and so important. I personally believe that politics is downstream from culture, and that culture is really what guides us more than anything. Our society, our communities, and everything else comes after. And it seems as though, at least here through my experience, I've noticed a politics have turned into culture, or at least there's been an attempt to turn politics into the next reality show. And I it's definitely filled with that narcissism, but also that pride, to where people will say things like, "Oh, just shoot off that nuke. Like, what are you doing?" Not being able to admit that they're wrong, and it definitely seems like a destructive path that we're going down, collectively. A lot of people, whatever side, I see a lot of people trying to prevent this from happening, but it does seem as though that there are a prevailing false authority who continues to push this idea that politics are culture.
I don't see any distinction anymore, honestly, between politics and culture in our society. I don't see it. Everything is political. In the time of World War II, before that, I think there were Olympic Games in Nazi Germany, and who wanted Nazi Germany? Of course, but still they remained with the idea that sports is beyond politics. Sports should be beyond even not Nazism. So they allowed it, and they did the games, and it was good. There was actually one of the best runners at that time was a Black American who won, and he became a legend. Many people don't even know. He won against Germans. It was great. It was good to see. Also for the Germans, good to experience. So how is it that we are now in a time where sports is political, where people Some people are excluded, and some people are not good enough to compete, or are bad guys who cannot compete. How is it possible that now certain parts of culture are dismissed? Certain opera singers cannot perform because they come from a certain country. How is it possible? What has art, sports, and sports to do with politics? Nothing. How is it even possible that certain professors who speak against some ideas that are mainstream now have to renounce? I don't understand. But others who are extreme in some ideas can stay. It doesn't make sense. Because anyway, we don't stick with one professor, we have many. So we can choose which professor we want to go to. We can have a free will, right? And we can also go to a bad professor and learn a lot good from the bad example. We need bad examples. But if a society does not allow you to have bad examples, it means that they do not want you to think for yourself. That's all. Why is there choice in the first place? Why are we so proud that there is choice? Choice makes no sense. We don't need choice. What makes sense is we need to think for ourselves. And so choice gives us that possibility to think for ourselves, but not necessarily. Because if you are just having choice between the one and the same thing, you don't learn to think for yourself. You just think that you think for yourself. In reality, the choice that you make is already chosen for you, and it's already pre-chewed for you, and you just you play a game which is not yours. And yes, in truth, in reality, and neuroscience knows that also, nobody has a choice because everything is subconscious anyway. So most of the choices we make are subconscious. So neuroscience, according to neuroscience, 80-90% of our choices. But that's where Zen comes forth. Philosophy comes, like true philosophy, like comes forth, or Taoism, or meditation, or all that, where we can learn to face our subconsciousness, to know ourselves, study ourselves, and by this realize who we truly are. And then we start to have more choice. We start to have true choice. But even that true choice, you see paradox in a paradox, it's a never-ending story. I shouldn't maybe say that because it's too complex for most, maybe right now. It makes too much. But on the highest level, there is no choice. But at the same time, there is choice. There is no choice and there is choice. We have to accept the paradox. We have to accept that both can be at one. And that's where actually everything starts. This is the middle way. Learning to accept the paradox.
It's the
black
difference
and
between,
white and black.
Yeah, the difference between things you can control and things you can't control. And you can always
Exactly.
control yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've always been fascinated by the idea of controlling others, whether it be through the government experiments of MK Ultra or anything like that. This like brainwashing, mind control. It's always fascinating, especially what they ended up concluding is that it's just a lot easier to pay people to behave badly instead of having to go through the trouble of brainwashing them. And it's just interesting. I've always prescribed to the idea that you can control yourself and nothing else. Because of that, you're able to, in a minuscule way, you're able to control your surroundings. You're able to manipulate small objects and things like that. But collectively, we're able to do wonderful things. But first, you have to control yourself more than anything. And I believe it's Jordan Peterson who's been pushing the idea that you should be a dangerous person, but with self-control, because you should know those outer limits, and yet you should have it's the word I'm looking for, the self-control to be able to contain that.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson is a controversial figure, and
Quite.
he is on the other extreme, and I do enjoy some of what he says, just for the extreme of it, because it's something that you do not hear anymore as much, and in the end, the truth is usually somewhere in between, so in the middle of it. But we need also extremes, because you see, on a grand scale of things, we need the extremes to meet, and that extreme views, people with extreme views, they clash, and from that clash, something comes forth. First, of course, conflict, strong reaction, but after the reaction, what happens is evolution. So no matter what it will be, either it will be an evolution of the consciousness, so we will become more self-aware as a whole, as humanity, or there will be no humanity, and there will be just a few humans or no humans, and this beautiful planet with flora and fauna, because we cannot destroy it. We can only destroy ourselves. The planet cannot be destroyed. Even when the dinosaurs died, the planet was there. So we wouldn't have developed, right? So even with all the nuclear weapons that we have, we cannot destroy this planet. But we can destroy ourselves. We can destroy the planet for us. But that's okay for the planet. That's what has to be.
Yeah, the planet will keep going.
Yeah, it's a sad thing for humanity. Yeah. But maybe that's what it has to be. If that's what it has to be, then we cannot do anything about it. But me and you, we do something about it. Even if you can reach one person, that's already good. That's already good to open the mind and heart of that one person, because one person now is not much. But if you take 1,000 years or 10,000 years, which is not much for this earth, then it can be a whole generation of enlightened people.
Yeah, it's that butterfly effect.
Yeah, so we have to think outside of our box. That also means to think outside of our age and limitations. And then everything makes sense. Then it makes sense that what we do, even if we just reach a couple people, not a majority of people. Anyway, if you reach a majority of people, usually there is something wrong with you. So, because the only way to do that is the only way to do that is that you have to become mainstream. You have to feed them with what they want to have, with what the mass wants to see and wants to hear and wants to experience. If you give the mass something that they do not know yet, then that what you said before, the fear of the unknown sets in, and it's impossible to go there. So
yeah, typically, truth speakers have never been the popular ones. All the way back to Plato,
all the way back to Socrates. So, I mean, the first Democrat was killed by democracy. So that's why democracy was basically killed, because Socrates was criticizing the democratical process. He said that it doesn't make sense if just demagogues use their power and manipulate the masses, then democracy is obsolete. Doesn't make sense. And he also criticized the gods that people believed in. So just by criticizing it, they made a huge gathering, and they decided, I don't know, like 80 to, or I don't know, 70 to 30, or I don't know, 80 to 20. I have no idea, but it wasn't so clear. But they decided that Socrates has to kill himself, basically, drink the poison. That's what he did. Yeah. And so that's when democracy basically died, from my standpoint of view. But at the same time, democracy, as Churchill said, democracy is the best thing that we have. It's not good. as the best thing that could be, but it is the best thing what you have right now in our Western culture countries, and it's okay. But it doesn't mean that autocracies like China is bad necessarily. We have to see not only the bad, we have to learn also to see the good and to see the things from a higher perspective, from a grand perspective. Imagine if China, which is one of the biggest countries in the world, would have democracy. There wouldn't be China anymore, right? It would disappear. Yeah. There would be many different countries that would fight each other. We see that with Russia when the UdSSR disappeared. That's one of the reasons why we are now maybe near to a nuclear war, because that country separated and now they are fighting each other. It's what it used to be. Ukraine used to be part of UdSSR, right? So now they are fighting each other. So Azerbaijan and Armenia are fighting each other. So many wars right now. So it is not necessarily good. We have to think also from human nature perspective and not from our ideal perspective, like how things should be, but how things are. And unfortunately, many people are still in a very dual way of living and thinking. And so conflict is inevitable, and that's why it is better to keep peace in the region rather than separate it in many pieces and then they just fight each other. It's not democracy. There's no democracy happening there. Yeah, same like America wanted to bring democracy to Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya, but in the end, it just made things just worse than before.
It was never going to happen.
Exactly. And not necessarily it has to be. It's different people. Yeah. They want different lifestyle. And democracy is not necessarily the best thing. For us, it's the best because that's what we know. But we have also one of the highest suicide rates in Western countries. Why? Why so many people are depressed? Why so many people take drugs? So it's not so simple. It's complex. And I know most people do not want to see that complexity because they want to feel superior. So they say, no, democracy is the best, the Western way is the best. And because I belong to that tribe of Western societies, I am so perfect and good and better than these people. So it gives you a feeling of superiority and self-righteousness. It gives you the right to judge others if you want. Well, but it's not good for self-development at all. Yeah. And it's not good for the world on the long run.
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's always going to be a bit of that conflict. At some point in time, it seems as though two of the larger systems are going to have to either figure out how to coexist or come to blows. It seems as though those leading the charge, for whatever reason they are in these positions, seemed hell-bent on spreading it across the world instead of just being okay with what they have.
That's a very good one. I would question that, you see, because not what you say, but just that general idea, which a lot of alternative people like us, I would call us alternative people. So if you allow me, so they believe that it's some powerful people who basically control the poor victims, the sheeps, right? There is this couple wolves or lions who control the sheeps. I question that idea very much. And I make myself even unpopular in that community. So why I question it is because from my view and realization, if you take away the wolf or the lion from the equation of the sheeps, what happens is the sheeps will start to look for a wolf or a lion. They will pay him to be a wolf or a lion, just to be back into that equation of sheep and lion, wolf and lion and sheeps. That's my view. That's my understanding. So that's also why we do not evolve yet so fast, because those who are awakening are still believing that there are some people who are controlling, and then there are the sheeps, and they are somewhere in between. No. The reason why the wolf and the lion has power is because the sheeps are giving the power away. They have the power, but they are giving it away to the wolf and the sheep, to the wolf and the lions. The wolves and the lions wouldn't have no power at all. They are very actually weak compared to the ability that the sheeps could have as a collective. But the sheeps, they say, no, come here, wolf, come here, lion. I will give you even money. I will pay you. And from time to time, you just eat someone, and you tell all of us that you're not going to eat anyone else. Only this you will eat. And so we all think, no, it will not be me. It will be only the other. But that fear will make the sheep live in a little bit of excitement, but at the same time, it doesn't need to think for itself, because there is always the lion or the wolf who decides.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to face its own shadows, because the wolf is the bad one. I am just a sheep. I'm just good. I have nothing to do with the bad. I am innocent, right? Yeah. That's the problem. It's because the individual does not want to face its own problems, its own shadows, trauma, abuse, madness, inner Hitler. I saw an interview between what was this philosopher professor's name again? Roger, no, the one that you just mentioned.
Jordan Peterson.
Exactly. He had an interview with a very famous English interviewer. I'm not good with names, but he's very famous. And Jordan told him, well, in a way, we all have an inner Stalin and Hitler within ourselves. And the interviewer looked stunning at him like, really? And Jordan, he didn't went on that because he didn't want to go with this guy into provocation. I don't know. He kept it low level. So he didn't went into it. But that says it all, He doesn't even question. He doesn't even think about. He didn't study Jungian psychology. He didn't study psychology at all, this guy. But he is a famous reporter, interviewer. He should study a little bit psychology. He should know a little bit more about humanity and himself. But he doesn't. So that's the narrative. We are all sheep. We are all innocent. It's the other who's the bad. And that's the problem. So as long as you say, okay, it's the powerful who control us, it's the powerful who are doing all the bad works, you see your own power. You don't face your own power. And you don't see that it is you who gives that person the control. It is you who is projecting on that bad, powerful person, that bad secret society. You are projecting on them your own madness, your own darkness, your own inner Stalin, Hitler. How many people can say that they know their inner Stalin, their inner Hitler, their inner madness, that they know, that they face it and they know it, that they have it? How many people? Yeah. I can say it. I know my inner Stalin. My wife knows. So, and I know it. We all have it. And that's the beauty of therapy. The beauty of Zen is not to become a better human being, but to become a human being, to be compassionate with what you are, rather becoming something special that you are not. That's what Zen and therapy work is about. And anyone who sells us this idea of becoming better than what we are, or live out some potential that we don't have yet, and so forth, I would question that. There is, of course, potential in us that we don't know. That's for sure. But what they mean is something else. They mean they have a certain specific idea of that potential, like becoming more vibrant, becoming more energetic, becoming more wild. Like, for example, I saw last time on Instagram, I sometimes study just for therapeutical reasons. So a guy who's selling that idea of wildness. We are all domesticated and we all need to be more wild. look at that pineapple. This pineapple is actually wild, he shows. And then he shows a domesticated one. Like, looks completely like normal, like we know it usually.
Yeah.
And yes, he's right in a way. It's nice. I would love to actually eat that wild pineapple, you know. And yes, it is true that we are domesticated, many of us, and that we have to learn that wild side. But what does it mean wild? Wild is all the darkness that we don't allow ourselves to come for. It's all that quirkiness, all that craziness that we have. It's part of creativity. But to say that domestication is bad is the same mistake. It's just another extreme. Of course, domestication is nice. I don't want to have a wife who, I don't know, is completely crazy and goes there and tomorrow here and doesn't take about care of the child because she thinks she's wild and she needs to go to the party and just leaves the child somewhere else, or whatever, you know, whatever wild can mean in that direction, completely out of the norm. Domestication is also beautiful, and it's also part of our process. And humanism, Zen is all about domestication. It's about containing and focusing that energy. But if you do too much Zen, you become one of those many Zen monks who are just living in emptiness and overly focused and overly control freaks and never allow themselves to be human and to express their humanness and to talk about crazy things or politics or anything. They only talk about the Buddha nature and Buddha Dharma. That's it.
Yeah.
Or everything they say. So, or they don't talk at all because speaking is not wise. It's better to be just quiet and not say anything, right? So
Yeah.
both is good. We need domestication, but we can also be wild at the same time. That's the key. Why not the paradox? In the paradox, we can have both.
Yeah, stop
But
being
again,
so uptight, but you got to buckle down when you need to
yes,
buckle down.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this session here. And I think it's a good note to end on. So, first, I would like to say thank you so much for coming back on. And I definitely want to get you back on again because these are important conversations. And I really enjoy our time together. So, on that note, is there anything you would like to shout out, let people know where they can find you?
They can find me on Clubhouse, on Instagram, Zen Master Jion Blonstein. Just Google it. You can find me anywhere. Yeah, I work as a therapist and as a Zen Master. Or actually, I do both. I connect that system. It's kind of a Zen therapy. And I will start doing also groups at some point again. I did it for 10 years now. Now it's a break time. Thank you so much, Jacob. I love you. Thank you very much.
Same back to you. There are his links in the episode description to where you can find him. So make sure and go check him out. He has a great Instagram. And as far as Rise to Liberty, you can find us at risetoliberty.com/links, and that will link you to everywhere we are. We are, of course, being suppressed by the soft censorship of our big tech overlords. So go ahead and fight that censorship by liking, sharing, and subscribing, and getting messages like this out there so other people can benefit from these conversations. There needs to be more of these conversations out in the world. So thank you once again, Jion. And everyone else, until next time, stay free, my friends.